What?
Here's Brunette. Brunette's in. Andrew Brunette shot, score! Andrew Brunette in sudden death overtime, and Minnesota is moving on.
I won't need my high school diploma anymore. I am the smart. I am the smart. I am the smart. I am the smart. S-M-R-T. I mean S-M-A-R-T.
Played here by Danny Heatley, and out they come 2-on-1. This is Niederreiter holding onto it, and he scores! Nino Niederreiter wins the series for the Minnesota Wild.
Welcome to the Giles and the Goalies podcast. We've got 3 again for the third consecutive week. We are on a roll, guys. I'm Charlie Beatty, and with me is Giles Farrell. Giles, hello.
Hi, guys.
And Ben Remington is also here. Wait, Giles, do you have facts for us this week?
I wanted to start with an apology, something I did not do last week.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a game day piece on Friday for the Wild and Ducks, and as you guys know, I love the Mighty Ducks series.
Oh, yeah.
That game day piece did not include a Mighty Ducks reference. I'd like to apologize for everyone.
During the game.
Right, but I didn't get any in the post, and that's right in my wheelhouse. Golden opportunity missed. I apologize.
Do we play the Ducks again this year?
No.
Ah, wow.
Maybe.
You just blew your shot for another 6 months.
No, we don't.
Anyway, Ben Remington is here also.
Hello.
You're not going to get introduced because we're just going to go right into Mighty Ducks chat.
You know what I thought was funny about the Mighty Ducks thing? When Giles tweeted out, admittedly, that he tweeted out that he didn't add a Mighty Ducks reference, I thought it was funny that, Charlie, that you and I both tweeted him within about 30 seconds of each other, I don't even know you anymore.
That's true, and we don't.
Yeah, because it was so out of character for Giles. It shocked and appalled both of us equally at the exact same time.
Well, I was hoping also for, the beginning of this podcast after last week when he gave us all that sweet Raj Al Ghul trivia that he would have some more movie stuff for us. And Giles and I were on the call a little early, and I know you were watching different movie, very different tone this week, The Royal Tenenbaums. But I thought maybe you'd have some fact about Gene Hackman or, that's all I got, but something about the 178th Street Y.
I should have, but I didn't. I was going to lead with this apology because, I've lost sleep over it.
Yeah. You really didn't come prepared for the Mighty Ducks or the apology.
No, I just winging it. Although I wish I had screen grabbed your guys' tweets because they were literally right on top of each other in my feed.
I think I typed mine out and then I delayed for a second and then Ben sent his in. And I felt weird, but I still did it.
It was almost as if you guys were piling on. It was just like, all right, thanks, guys.
Ben and I don't pile on.
No, that's never happened.
Anyway, by the way, just winging it really should be the title of this podcast every week.
Yeah, if only, the Wild somehow incorporated some kind of wing into that ambiguous creature that they use, we could have done that.
That would be frightening.
It would be very frightening.
I want 10 concept designs on my desk by Monday morning.
Be like a flying man bear. It'd be a flying man bear pig.
Flying
see if we were a Detroit Red Wings podcast, we'd be gold.
Yeah, that's true.
Pure gold.
I'm sure there were probably already is.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably 10 blogs and 20 podcasts named just winging it.
Yeah,
that's Winging It in Motown. Isn't that like a popular Red Wings blog?
Isn't that? Actually, that might be the SB Nation affiliate.
I think it is.
Red Wings.
Anyway, that was a new record for getting off topic. Mm-hmm. By the way,
I don't know. Yeah, we
actually have Wild related things to talk about this week. Mainly Saturday night, and really last week in general, leading up to Saturday night. And that was a big couple of days for the Wild. And I think it's fun to think about it in the fact that all three of us have already forgotten that we played New Jersey since the last time we had a podcast because it seems so insignificant now. But, I mean, you go into Friday, you lose to Anaheim, you go back and pull the rope-a-dope on St. Louis on Saturday night, and that was, like I just said off the air a second ago, I think the biggest win of the year for the Wild.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it was big for a lot of reasons because, it was big, obviously, because of St. Louis and where they're at and where we're at, and every win is pretty huge right now. But I think it was also big because the night before, they really kind of had a game stolen from them by John Gibson, wrong goalie last name. So I think it was huge for them to bounce back and to get a win. And, Dubnyk really carried them through that game, so it was huge to have him bounce back after kind of getting out-dueled a little bit the night before and prove that he is still as awesome as we think he is.
That was also huge, I think, because if you looked at the standings before that game and the Wild lost that, and some things went against them on Saturday, standings-wise, games-wise, it really tightened up the race.
Yep.
And the thing about it is, in the end, a lot of those things actually turned out pretty well. Winnipeg losing and the Wild coming back to win. But if they lost that game, suddenly they lost 3 out of 4. And we're going into this stretch we know is murder at the end of the year, again, with 2 losses against teams that we know are going to be in the playoffs.
Yep.
And for all the good work the Wild have done for the last couple months, it's really only been about 50% against teams that are really worthwhile. They played a lot of bad, mediocre to bad teams in that stretch. And they beat them. But now this feels different. And even though they got thoroughly outplayed on Saturday, they came away with a win. That was a huge one.
Yeah, that's just good heavens. It's such a... I'm curious as to what it's like for the players, just being in this mental grind of the playoffs for the last 2 months, because just for me, these 2 days off are pretty relaxing, because good heavens. I'm exhausted.
Yeah, you would hope they don't wear themselves out on playoff hockey by the time they get to the actual playoffs.
It's exhausting watching them play.
It was exhausting watching them play on Saturday when they were just defending for 40 minutes.
Yeah, that was brutal because, obviously they scored, they had the go-ahead goal a little bit late, but it was tough. Because they were down, they were tripled up in shots at one point. I remember they were down in shots 33-11 at one point in the game, and coming off of a disappointing loss the night before at home, and then doing the old the red eye back-to-back to St. Louis as they did. That's really a momentum stopper in what's been a pretty decent stretch for them leading into that game, even with the 2 losses in the 3 games before that. So it was huge. It was big for momentum. It was big in the standings. Hopefully they can use that, as a spring off point, that they weren't at their best, but they still won the game, and use it as a jumping off point, especially, because this week is brutal. They're facing Nashville, Washington, and then St. Louis again. So they're going to need all the momentum they can get.
Luckily, this is facing Nashville at the absolute right time.
Yes.
Basically, since the Wild beat them, Nashville has been on the roller coaster down.
Yep.
But they're still a good team. But yeah. What did you guys think of the way that the Blues game played out, though? And I think I'm about to nominate something for the World Series of hot takery. But people called it. A lot of people called it the rope-a-dope game. I think I saw people from as far afield as Tom Chorsky and Wes Walls and us, mentioning on Twitter during the game, this is a rope-a-dope. Because they just sat back for the first 2 periods. And part of me doesn't think that a hockey team would ever actually intentionally do that.
Right.
But the way that the Wild completely changed the game in the 3rd period, until they had the lead, in which case they sat back again, part of me just can't shake the idea that this was the strategy going in. It was just survive for 2 periods. And obviously, if they didn't survive through 2 periods, that changes the strategy. But they did. They were 1-1 going into the 3rd. And then let's sting them in the 3rd.
I would have a difficult time believing that was the strategy. I
just really seems like it.
More of it. Yeah, it just probably more of it just had to do with they played the night before, and I don't know. Something I keep thinking about is how they had that first goal disallowed, and then not even a minute later they tied it up.
Yep. Unlike there are only 2 shots of the second period.
Right.
Their shooting percentage was outstanding. Unsustainable, as someone
Did you think
pointed out.
that Parise's goal shouldn't have counted?
That was tough. I wasn't mad at the no goal. I would have been okay either way, or I was. But I guess if I was the official, I would have said he's just. It looked like he was more just bringing his leg around, but I don't know.
I thought he was stopping, and then he missed the puck with his stick. He's clearly trying to play the puck with his stick, and it just missed and hit his foot and went in. That one, and the way they were talking about it on the broadcast was so clear that it wasn't going to count. And I thought to myself, this seems pretty close. I mean, he didn't swing his leg at anything. He was bringing his leg forward to try and stop himself. I thought. I mean, feel free to disagree, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if I saw that exactly. I think I was out of town and I was flipping around with some friends at that point, but so I missed the actual replays of it. It just came back to the goal disallowed call, but I think unfortunately it's kind of like they just can't have a whole lot of gray area. I think with that call was the reason why it was shot down, because if anybody moves their leg at all towards the puck, whether I don't know, it just seems like they don't like to call intent so much as they like to call the actual action itself. Because I didn't see the play obviously, but I don't think that from everything that I've heard, it didn't sound like he actually swung his foot like trying to kick it, but that's just kind of how it could have been perceived, and that's what they went with.
Well, speaking of disallowed goals, in that very same game.
Yes.
Early in the game.
Good God.
I mean, how close did we all come to complete meltdown if that goal... And that goal was seconds away from standing. And if people don't know what we're talking about, it's the St. Louis goal, minute 41 seconds into the game, that never actually went in the net. And when you saw the replay a couple of times, it wasn't even all that close. It was deflected, hit the outside of the net. It kind of bounced oddly.
Yep.
Because the nets in St. Louis are really loose. I know every other NHL arena, it almost looks like it's just one solid, hard piece that just wraps around the posts. Those St. Louis nets actually had some give to them. And I think that's what really screwed everybody up on this no goal, on the deflected shot. But how do you have 12 people on the ice, 16 if you count
the officials,
all the officials, and everybody right there, and an entire war room in wherever it is these days, still in Toronto, I think.
Yeah.
And everybody misses it for the length of like a 3-minute actual review when they were trying to figure out if it was a high stick or not. How does that happen?
I mean, I'll put this out there. To be fair, the referee, or one of the referees, was noted tequila drinker Tim Peel. So only God knows what he was doing before the game.
That's the harshest implication.
And just say it. Just putting that out there.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong.
Speaking of hot takery.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but they still have goal judges, correct? Like they still have a guy behind the net with the button to the light kind of deal?
Yeah, but I've never seen a goal judge who was under the age of 74.
That's a good point, but that's what I'm getting at. That's just flat out embarrassing. I mean, for the league, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you have a puck that goes nowhere near the mouth of the net and swishes the net in the back from hitting the back of the net, and some geriatric with a button to push, declares that a goal in an actual like real life regular season hockey game, like that's really embarrassing for the NHL.
And it almost never got corrected.
Right. That's even worse. As bad as the call is, the fact that it was, corrected by the skin of their teeth is almost exponentially worse.
The best part about this for me, anyway, is that I was doing some work because I had to cover some college basketball games this weekend. So I was not watching the beginning of the game, but I had it recorded so I could go and flip and catch up with whatever I needed to see. And I was following along on Twitter, and I saw a bunch of people say, "Oh, St. Louis scored." And then by the time I switched over, I'd seen that people said, "Oh, the puck never actually went in." So I watched the whole replay process play out, knowing how it was going to end. And my favorite part was right when they're about to drop the puck again, somebody just frantically laying on the horn, letting them know, like, you gotta come back. It was like a guy driving a big rig who's going straight at another guy driving a big rig, just laying on that same horn, trying to get him to notice because he's asleep. And that's what it sounded like to me. And it was hilarious to know, like, oh, you guys really done screwed up, and somebody's got to fix this.
Yeah, I can't even imagine just the sheer amount of anger and hot takes that would have happened had that goal counted, and they would have lost that game. Oh, I know. The love affair that Minnesotans in general have with hating officiating and blaming officiating. I don't know that it could get a whole lot worse than something that absurdly blatant like that. That would have been so over the top. It would have been almost unbelievable. Like, you wouldn't have actually bought that it really happened.
I've never seen a goal even attempt to be called on a puck that didn't go in.
Right.
You've seen a couple that went through, like, the side of the net.
Yep.
Maybe there was a little bit of maybe the net got a little bit sliced or something like that.
Sure.
And those counted because, back before they had replay. I think that happened in the playoffs one year. That was a big deal. I've never seen that in hockey. I've seen it actually in soccer, where a ball didn't go in the net and it was given as a goal. It went onto the side of the net. But never in hockey. That would have been pretty unprecedented. I'm sure it would still be the talk of the league, I bet.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But they got away with it.
Peak Minnesota on social media.
Yeah.
Enter at your own risk.
Yeah, I don't know that it was a rope-a-dope game necessarily. Like you said, I don't buy that an actual hockey team would use any kind of strategy even resembling the quote-unquote rope-a-dope. I just think it was.
When I say that, hold on. When I say that, I'm not saying that they were literally just sitting back and trying to defend the whole game.
I know
they were being really careful about picking their spots for 2 periods, and then opening the game up in the third a little bit.
Yeah, and maybe that's the case, but I kind of chalk it up more to that's how they played on the back-to-back the second half of almost every back-to-back this year, and I just chalk it up to a goalie win, really. I just chalk it up. I mean, Dubnyk made 41 saves. And that's a good night no matter who you're facing, and especially against a division-leading team like the Blues. And in a
building where the Wild don't.
Right, or the building where they haven't won in 9 years, 8 years, something like that.
When you're tossing around, the last time the Wild won was when Pavel Demitra played for them. It's been a while.
Aww. Sad.
Well, it's interesting that during the intermissions, because obviously somebody in St. Louis just made a documentary about Pavel Demitra,
right?
And they showed little clips of it. Some players like Kikachuk talking about Pavel Demitra. What I never realized about the guy, and I mentioned this, is that I didn't realize that he was such a big personality.
Yeah,
I never met him, never seen him, whatever. But he always just kind of struck me as a very quiet Eastern European player, which is almost a stereotype. But he honestly did strike me as a guy who was just sort of a silent professional, did his job, and that was it. But as it turns out, he was kind of like a legendary personality wherever he played. I never realized that.
Yeah, it's not something you heard much about when he was here, at least from my memory as well. You heard about him and Gabrick certainly being close, being fellow Slovaks, but you never really heard about him being any kind of, not locker room leader necessarily, but being that guy in the locker room that you're talking about. It just, I don't know if it was just, I don't certainly think it was intentionally downplayed, but it just wouldn't. You never got the sense as a fan that he was
just sort
one
of
of those kind of
revered by
guys.
the people he played with.
Right.
Just sort of seemed like another guy. And,
Right.
I'm sure that everyone's reputation gets enhanced a little bit when what happened to him
Right.
happens to him. And if anybody doesn't know what happened to him, he was one of the players that died in the Lokomotiv Yaroslavl plane crash a couple years ago after he left the NHL. So that always gives everybody a little bit of a boost. But the way they were talking about it, that can't nearly be all of it. It sounds like everybody loved him.
Yeah.
So there's nothing really to that. It just was a surprise to me to hear it.
No, sure, me too.
That's great. I mean, it's good to hear that he was such a great guy. But you were talking about goalies, which is a good way to kind of segue into what we wanted to talk about next.
Mm-hmm.
In the the Dubnyk train just keeps rolling on, and we don't want to get into another topic about how many games he can play.
Sure.
Because clearly the answer now is all of them.
Yes.
I think they only maybe have one or two more back-to-backs left. But we do have a backup goalie still, and perhaps you might remember him as Darcy Kemper, the one-time savior, would-be savior of the Wild, Darcy Kemper. And he's working his baseball cap game pretty good over the last couple of months or so, or sometimes his press box game. For some reason, they still put Backstrom on the bench every once in a while.
Oh, why?
But is he going to play at all?
At this point, I'd be inclined to say no. But yeah, they have 3 back-to-backs left. Looking at the schedule right now, and one of them's an away, one of them is a home and away, and the other one's double home. I don't know.
The home and away one would be the one you're thinking of, right?
Not necessarily, because the road trip one is Toronto and the Islanders. And, we keep on begging for him to play against the crap teams that are left on the schedule, and at this point, Toronto's the only one left. So,
True,
if you're going to...
side of that argument is you don't want to give that game away.
No, yeah, I understand that, yeah. So, I mean, I don't know, that's... obviously, that's on Yo and what he wants to do, but I don't know, with 3 back-to-backs, you'd think he'd sneak into one of them, but he hasn't yet, and they've rode Dubnyk on, what is it now, three or 4 back-to-backs now in a row since we acquired him, so there's really no precedent for Dubnyk sitting on either side of a back-to-back.
I mean, if I remember right, Kemper played in Toronto last year, and it was just a complete catastrophe. He couldn't stop a beach ball to save his life.
That was really early, though, right?
Yeah,
Right,
that was,
it was
his first call-up.
October, November, or something. But just as a point for if that would be the game he plays, if he plays at all. But
Yeah, Dubnyk started 4 back-to-backs now, since we acquired him.
So clearly he doesn't care.
Right.
No. The only way I see Kemper playing is if, say, it's like the last 2 games of the year, and the Wild can't, just like last year, they can't go up or down in the standings. They're just locked into that top wild card spot.
Mm-hmm.
Then I could see Dubnyk getting a night off.
Yeah. Yeah, and those last games of the season are at Nashville and at St. Louis, so it's very possible that they don't affect the standings, seeing as how there's some space between us and those 2 teams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
It
interesting,
surprised me
right?
if Stu Bickle played in that last game, if it didn't mean anything to either team.
Is it the last one against St. Louis or against Nashville?
St. Louis.
Okay. Steve Bickle, who apparently got into quite the fight this weekend, from what I understand. So he absolutely
he just annihilated
pummeled the guy.
somebody.
It didn't look good. Another off topic, but we don't have to get into it. But I have seen the video, and it's not one for those who don't want to see fighting in hockey, because maybe it is because it's Exhibit Z. I don't know how many exhibits they're up to, but so Kemper last weekend. I mean, the problem with the Wild is if they're going to save him for when they've already clinched a playoff spot, and they're only 4 points ahead of the Kings right now.
Right.
And granted, they're still ahead of Vancouver and Calgary, so being 4 points of the Kings doesn't necessarily mean they're only 4 points up. But it could be a while before they clinch. I mean, it might not happen until that last weekend. And I just worry that if they do save Kemper and then they get into, or they don't play him because they can't, and then they get into the playoffs and something happens to Dubnyk, your season is over. There's no way you can come back into that scenario and be ready to go.
Yeah, that's
a game somewhere.
Yeah, that's a pretty tall task. And as well as Kemper played last year in the Colorado series. Yeah, I mean that was coming off of where he started quite a bit down the stretch. I mean, he wasn't up to Dubnyk status necessarily, but he started quite a bit down the stretch for them last year, and then played fairly well in that Colorado series. I think had a pretty good series, but if you're looking at a situation where he has one start or even potentially less in the last 30 games of the season, 40 games of the season, that's not good. I mean, you're looking at like what was it when we had to start? Was it Hudobin that we had to start against Chicago a couple years ago when both Harding and Backstrom went down?
Yeah, well, that happens to the Wild every couple of years,
right?
Couple months.
Yeah,
lose both their goalies and have to go with the third guy. It was fun when the third guy was Anton Hudobin.
Yeah,
he was hilarious. I don't know. I think Hudobin's actually a pretty good goaltender for one thing. Second of all, he's probably terrifying to play against because you don't know what he's going to do. Even he doesn't know what he's going to do. Maybe I don't know if he's calmed that down or not, but.
Probably not fair to judge him because he plays in Carolina and they're a hot mess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's kind of like Dubnyk's time in Edmonton and Phoenix.
Yeah.
Right.
Arizona, Glendale, whatever.
It was Phoenix.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it was Arizona.
No, it's Arizona this year.
Yeah. Oh, it was this year.
Yep. Hard to believe, isn't it?
Phoenix. We call him Phoenix.
This podcast does not officially recognize the Arizona Coyotes.
I don't actually officially recognize the entire state of Arizona.
Just like they don't recognize daylight savings time.
Yeah, or Martin Luther King Day. When they can get on that one, I'll start recognizing them as a state.
They don't recognize MLK?
They don't.
What?
At least as of a couple years ago, Arizona as a state did not celebrate Martin Luther King Day.
I thought that was national.
Oh,
all right.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's bizarre.
Let's not go there.
Yeah. It's just going down a
we don't need to get into that discussion right
Why
now.
would you not? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. It's weird.
We quickly went from Dubnyk to Martin Luther King.
Yeah, this is now a political podcast.
Very, very quickly.
You know what? I had a dream that one day the Minnesota Wild would have a goalie that could carry them through the playoffs, and now my dream is recognized. Is that a stretch? Is that too much?
Yeah, that was a real stretch.
Okay. I was just trying to connect to the loose.
Validated Arizona.
Trying to connect to the loose ends there.
Let's move on.
Yes. Let's.
Right now, as we speak, maybe there's a lot of old gray-haired guys on a beach, in Florida, talking about changing the rules of this game.
Sure.
The GM's meetings. I think they're still in Florida. That's where they always seem to be used to have them. Yeah, Boca Raton.
Ooh.
So bunch of old white guys down in Boca Raton. They'll fit right in.
Mm-hmm.
But they're down there changing the rules, maybe, of the NHL. They do this every year, obviously. But there's some interesting topics of discussion this year. We can go in any order on this, but maybe we'll start with the goalies. Because that wasn't 2 weeks ago that the Wild had a really bizarre goal against Colorado caused by what we all thought was goalie interference on Cody McLeod. And they're talking about putting in a review to check for goalie interference on plays. And they're trying to figure out also what constitutes goalie interference, which if anyone out there can tell me, that would be great.
Yeah, I think then that one was weird too because they reviewed that and it wasn't even a goal at first, and then they called it a goal after watching the replay. After watching the replay of Cody McLeod, basically kind of cross-checking Devin Dubnyk into the net, several times they decide to call it a goal when it wasn't originally a goal. So that one was extra bizarre and infuriating. But goal interference for the most part, I mean, I've seen some various tweets on it, and we've certainly been snake bitten by it a couple of times. It's just not really been consistent. And I think, and that's the problem that they're addressing, is that there's been some plays where, there's been a few of them that were kind of more memorable than others this year, but some plays where it just seems like there wasn't really any goalie interference to speak of, or it was the classic, their own player shoved our guy into the goalie kind of situation that isn't supposed to be called, but it was. And then also times where, there was no goalie interference called at all, when their guy, essentially, freight trained our goalie. So I think it's a consistency issue, and hopefully they can really get the letter of the law kind of nailed down and get something super concrete, and then use the replays to really enforce that. Because, I mean, the way that whole McLeod thing went down was a pretty egregious, I thought. But, certainly they felt that it was a good goal. So that I think that's one of the problems that they need to cure.
I guess I'm not sure how you can review a penalty. To me, if you're going to start looking at goalie interference and a review, then you kind of open it up to reviewing other penalties, which, I don't know, that just kind of seems like a gray area for me. But
are they looking at it as a penalty?
I would like to see them polish how they... I guess what I more would like to see them is just polish up goalie interference, like you just said, instead of reviewing it. I'm sure that's still a ways down the road, but I don't know.
Are they looking at it as a penalty, or are they looking at it only in relation to goals scored, though? Would be my question.
I think they're just talking about being able to call a goal off because you review it to see if somebody bumped into the goaltender.
Right.
I don't know if you would have actually called a penalty on it then.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm thinking, because the 2-minute penalty, I think, would be something separate. And I agree with you, Giles. It's kind of like the strike zone in baseball. When you start reviewing whether penalties happened or not, I think that turns into kind of a gong show. But as it relates to whether a goal is a good goal or not, I think that's something that they need to maybe just take a little bit closer of a look at.
Well, it's one of those things where you always hear the whole, we can review every goal from the situation room or whatever. And if you can do that and make an instant judgment that doesn't slow down things where you have long reviews, I'm okay with that, because if your goalie just gets trucked. Like, I think of, it was the night before the Wild beat Dallas, and we were talking about this on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and they were playing in Detroit, Dallas was, and it was a game that ended like 7-6 in overtime.
Yes.
But the sixth goal for Detroit, Justin Abdelkader literally two-hand shoved Kari Lehtinen out of the way, and they didn't call anything. Now, if you could have somebody who was in communication with a referee or, the goal judge or whatever, then, and can instantly say, you got to take a look at that, I think that's goal interference, and they can do it really fast, I would be okay with that. Because if I'm Kari Lehtinen freaked out after that game, and for good reason, because there was nothing he could do about this, and it was clearly goalie interference, and the goal shouldn't have stood, and Dallas probably would have won that game. So if you can get it right and get it right fast, I say it's fine by me.
Yeah.
All right.
Good talk.
Issue number 2. We'll build up, because this is the third one I think is the most interesting. But sure. Issue number 2 is the diving stuff and the embellishment stuff. Mm-hmm. And they put in all the fines this year. And I'll just read what I have in front of me. To crack down on diving and embellishment, Hockey Ops Department is tracking it this season. First offense, a player receives a warning. Second offense, $2,000 fine, announced publicly, which is key.
Yep. From
there, the fines go to $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, starting with the fifth offense, and the head coach is fined $2,000. The GMs looked at video of incidents over the past week and went through the same exercise Hockey Ops has all season. The results of a poll will be given to the group Tuesday, educating the GMs on the process of making a point. So they're talking about reviewing potential diving calls as well?
I think that's something they've been doing.
Maybe that's just something they're doing at the meetings, but they're not actually going to do on the ice.
No, they're not reviewing them during the game at all. No, they do it after the fact. Just like with any kind of like game misconduct or anything like that, when they review it to assess a suspension, I think that's what they're doing with embellishment.
Okay.
So that's obviously that's very welcome. I think that it's a good thing that they have the system already in place, but increasing the fines I think would be a good thing. I don't think that hockey has a diving problem. I don't think we're anywhere even close to the level of the NBA has diving, but anything to discourage it more is fine by me.
What about the idea of calling embellishment without calling penalties? Which they only ever call embellishment if they're going to call a penalty anyway.
Right.
But, I mean, there are a few situations there where a guy's clearly just going down to sell something.
Yep.
There was one I saw a video of from this weekend. I'm trying to remember who it was. It was just awful.
Yep.
Bobby Ryan. And somebody's elbow came within, 7 to 8 inches of his face. Completely incidentally, they were making a hockey play with their stick and the elbow was just there. And he paused and then started to drift backwards and then fell down. And it was so clear.
Yeah.
And the guy who, I can't remember who it was or even who they were playing, but the guy whose elbow it was just turned around and just gave him that kind of come on look,
Right.
And that's the kind of stuff where I'd love to see that just called on its own.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to get fines for that and the public shaming, I think is good. That's always fun.
So you're telling me that somebody who used to play with Corey Perry and Ryan Getzlav just blatantly tried to sell a penalty that wasn't happening? Shocking.
Tell me more, Giles.
I just think Corey Perry likes to make things out to be a little more. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Corey Perry sucks.
I don't think you're saying he's a diver, but I think what you're saying is that Corey Perry might have a bigger victim complex than most NHL players.
I think he's saying he's a diver.
Which I was trying to be diplomatic about the whole thing, Ben.
There's no diplomacy in this podcast.
Not anymore.
Yeah. No, I think I've heard it brought up by someone before. I don't remember who exactly it was, but they made a good point where it's like they still call a penalty, and then they call the guy who dove for embellishment. And it's like that, fair point to whoever made it. I wish I could remember who it was, but that makes no sense at all. Like, you're basically saying, it doesn't. I guess it depends on the situation. Because if the guy was, hacked a little bit, and then the guy goes into, some kind of Oscar-winning performance about it, maybe you still want to give the guy who actually hacked a penalty. But if you really want to get diving completely out of the game, then I don't know, maybe you don't call the whatever penalty was assessed. Depending on the severity of it, I suppose would be the argument there. Maybe just that they have the option to not call whatever penalty it was on the original offender, based on how severe it was, because
I think they already do have that option. They just never do it.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. You never see it. Right. You always see 2 minutes for this and 2 minutes for embellishment. And it just, sometimes it's the diving is so obvious that it's just like, you really shouldn't be giving this other dude a penalty. That's kind of a joke.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to notice the difference between those two words. Diving is not embellishment, and embellishment is not diving.
Well, yeah.
Diving assumes that a penalty never happened. There was no contact.
Okay.
Embellishment is just playing up contact that actually happened, embellishing the contact, to let everybody know that it happened, instead of just fighting through it.
Yeah, I suppose.
And in diving is this scenario where you call the dive, but you don't call anything else because there is nothing else to call.
Right.
So essentially, what I'm saying is that they never call diving; they only call embellishment.
Yeah, that's kind of my point. I'm with you on that.
Yeah. All right, should we move on to topic number 3?
Sure.
This one generally gets people going. Topic number 3 is overtime and shootouts and what to do about overtime and shootouts, basically. Trying to reduce the number of games that are decided by a shootout, which I think everyone is in favor of, even if you do enjoy the drama of a shootout.
Right.
And they've been working on this in the AHL this year, where they actually have, instead of 4-on-4 overtime and then straight to a shootout, I think they have lengthened overtime. It's like 7 minutes. And they play half of it 4-on-4, and if that doesn't work, then they move it to 3-on-3. And then you'd still have a shootout if nothing gets solved 3-on-3, but if anyone's ever watched 3-on-3 hockey, I mean, it's ridiculous.
Right.
They used to have it with like the Young Stars game at the All-Star game, and it was just a goal every 5 seconds. Granted, that was the All-Star game, but you can't hit anybody when they have acres of space out on the ice. And it's just 2-on-1s every direction. So it's fun to watch. But is this the solution?
Oof. I don't know. It's tough because I'm really not a fan of the shootout. I certainly understand why they did it. Coming out of the lockout, they wanted something, and they felt like they lost a lot of ground with the fans missing that entire season, which they did. So I understand that, but it's something that every hockey purist in the world absolutely positively hates. So anything to reduce the amount of shootouts, I think, is good. And if you have an overtime goal, I think that's just as satisfying to the average fan as a shootout win. So, or as a shootout would be in general. So I'm for it. It's a little gimmicky, but maybe it's a necessary evil.
The 3-on-3 is a little gimmicky?
Yeah.
What you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not as gimmicky as a shootout necessarily.
Well, that's what I mean, though. It's less gimmicky than a shootout, so I guess I'm for it.
There was a game this past week. It was Boston, and I can't remember who they played, but in overtime there was a couple of penalties called, and it ended up being 3-on-3 for 90 seconds.
It's hilarious.
It was actually, it is pretty hilarious. I wouldn't be opposed to that, but I also just wouldn't be opposed if they extended overtime by another 3, 4, even 5 minutes.
Right.
Just as...
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, just because usually in the playoffs you see most games generally tend to end in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
If they go to overtime.
Yep.
Especially if you did it 4-on-4.
Right.
Right.
And I've never understood why overtime wasn't 10 minutes. It seems like such an obvious solution. I would love to see an actual number of how many games do end in the first 10 minutes of overtime.
Right. In the playoffs?
In the playoffs, I guess it's the only numbers you could use.
Right.
But it just seems like such an obvious solution, and it doesn't resort to anything gimmicky. Because 4-on-4 hockey, 3-on-3 is gimmicky because it takes a lot to get to 3-on-3 hockey in the flow of play.
Yep.
Like you said, you have to have 2 matching minors. But matching minors happens all the time. So 4-on-4 is something we're all used to. It's not weird because certain stretches of probably every hockey game are played 4-on-4.
Mm-hmm.
Just make it longer.
Yeah.
Then what do you do about the points for an overtime game? What's the best point system? Because obviously the 1 point for losing in there is obviously designed to make sure teams go for it.
Yeah.
Because that was the problem 15 years ago.
Remember those? Back when they had ties and they only awarded wins and losses. Oh my God, were those overtimes brutal? It was wow. It was so bad to watch those overtimes. And understandably so.
7th grade dance.
It was
before things get going.
It really was. So yeah, I certainly don't think we want to go back to that. The overtime loss point kind of sucks, but I don't know. I don't know that they're going to go to every game being a 3-point game like we saw in the Olympics. 3 points for a regulation win, 2 for an overtime win.
Yeah, they did that in the Olympics because it's such a short tournament. You need to find a way to separate the teams.
Exactly. Back. Yeah. So I don't know, but the people who bring up the fact that that some games have different point totals than others, it's kind of a valid point. Like this game only awarded 2 total points, and this game awarded 3, and there's a point to that. But yeah, like that Olympic setup is interesting, but I don't know. I think it would just kind of it could get a little out of hand, maybe. With the point totals, it would maybe stretch things out a little bit more, and they need to be maybe wouldn't be quite as exciting leading into the playoffs as they would like.
It is.
Yeah, I'm not.
Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
I was gonna say I'm not sure if I want to see a President's Trophy winner with 159 points at the end of the regular season.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is it one of those things though with points though where are we as a culture just too sensitive to this stuff? Like we have to have results.
Yeah, and I think that was the reason for the shootout to begin with. Because they had so many games that ended in ties, and those especially before the overtime loss, it was those brutal ties that I think they were losing a lot of casual fans on that. Not losing casual fans, but they were a lot of casual fans really didn't like it all that much, and it really kind of left a bad taste in your mouth when you left the arena having paid X amount of dollars to see the game, and there wasn't a result. And every other sport, I suppose, other than a regular season NFL game, which is incredibly rare for that to happen, you get a result at the end of the game. And so they were just trying to match up with the other professional sports and giving everybody a result when they left that game.
So is it too much to ask? Is it too much to ask for the entire culture to just lighten up? Except the fact that you're going to see athletes do amazing things and not worry about the results.
I'm totally fine with ties as long as we don't get the ties that we were getting in the mid '90s, like we were talking about. Your record gets a little weird with the 4 columns, but I don't know. I didn't mind ties as much as obviously the casual fan. So
I hated them. But it's funny because I'm a soccer guy where nobody minds ties in soccer.
Right.
It's such a different thing. I mean, soccer is... The entertainment value in soccer is not necessarily always tied to the score.
Yep.
Like soccer people will tell you, we can watch a 0-0 game that was thoroughly entertaining. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't want to hear that.
Right.
But you put that argument on hockey, and you see, even if it was 5-5, people are like, but they tied. You saw 10 goals.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway. So we can't fix the overtime tonight, is what you're trying to tell me.
Unfortunately, no. It's not happening.
Well, what are we even doing here then?
It's a good question.
If we could fix the overtime, we probably wouldn't be doing this podcast.
Well, we'd be doing it from Boca Raton, which I can tell you sounds kind of awesome.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm watching NHL Network, and I mean, it's there's a lot of jealousy when you're watching Gary Bettman get his tan on outside right now on the set.
And then they always have those weird reports from just outside the beach with EJ Radic.
Yeah, it's actually kind of windy. It looks like whatever rug Gary has on his head's about to fly off. So I'm actually hoping this gets interesting here.
That would be the only time he ever got cheered by an NHL crowd.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, he'll probably get cheered in Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's true, and or Seattle.
Yeah,
if that happens.
The booing of Gary Bettman really doesn't mean anything anymore.
No, it doesn't. It's
half the people who are doing it don't realize that they're only doing it because they think that's what's supposed to happen.
Yeah,
Gary Bettman comes out.
Actually, I really had a dislike for him until I think it was a couple summers ago. I read a book on all he had done just prior to the second lockout, or that last one, whatever the number that was, second, third, whatever.
Sure.
The 2005 one or the 2012 one?
The 2012.
Oh, okay, that would have been the third one then.
Right.
And it kind of changed my tune on him a lot.
Explain.
I mean, I'm not big on him, but I still, he's just in terms of how the game has grown and terms of a TV standpoint, marketing standpoint, and added a few more teams. It was actually pretty fascinating. Just to kind of see how at one point he had to beg, I think it was Fox, to do a TV deal with him. And then most recently he cashed in on a $2 billion deal with NBC in the US.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a very fascinating insight on his tenure as commissioner.
Which people will still complain about because it's the smallest TV deal.
Right.
But do remember this is the smallest sport, and it's always going to be.
Yeah.
And another thing was kind of going back to that fighting thing we ever so briefly discussed earlier was he took over, I think it was like 93, and back then the league was still highly viewed as just kind of more of a heavily fighting league, and now look where it is.
Yep.
Fighting is hardly even there anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, compared to what it was.
Yeah.
Good guy, Gary Bettman.
FYI.
Who knew?
Giles Farrell is the first person to ever say that. And he qualified. You qualified greatly.
I say I liked him. I just said it greatly changed my tune on him.
Yeah, I've never been a huge anti-Bettman guy. I've certainly. I mean, I'm not going to sing his praises and paint a picture of him and hang it up in my my living room or anything. But I think the lockout. Obviously he is chiefly responsible for that, but. I think it's a little bit more of a boys' club ownership issue sometimes than necessarily a Bettman issue. Bettman, I mean, you can hate him for this, but he's really just kind of more of a puppet for what sounds like a small group of owners that really...
Well, that's a commissioner's job.
Right. And so he gets the blame for, a lot of owners doing a lot of, maybe... not so nice things, and sure he's ultimately responsible for it, but a lot of people think that he's 100% behind everything that happens with lockouts, and that's not necessarily the case. So I'm certainly not going to say the guy's going to win humanitarian or certainly he's not going to be man of the year for any union whatsoever, but I'm kind of with Giles where it's there's a slightly brighter side to the picture.
Yeah, I think if your enjoyment of an individual game, I'm talking about an individual 16-minute game here, is colored by your hatred for the commissioner of the league,
exactly,
you're greatly missing the point.
Yeah, I'm absolutely with you on that because I don't think David Stern, Bud Selig, or Roger Goodell have done themselves a whole lot of favors in the last 5 years either. So,
and commissioners don't. Commissioners are not there to make the fans happy.
No, they're not.
They're there to make the people who make money in this sport happy, and that's the owners. But it's one of those things where if it really does bother you that much, don't buy tickets.
Yep.
And I say that as fully one of those people who I don't buy tickets anymore. Sure. I have not been to a game since the last lockout. And I don't foresee actually attending one that I spend money on. But that's just, put your money where your mouth is. If you're going to complain about what the sport does to you, then don't keep going.
Right.
You know what I mean? I still like hockey. I still watch games on television, where I know I'm still sort of supplying money to the league. But, it's a little different when you're spending $100 every night. Mm-hmm. That I just won't do.
Sure.
So that's my personal stand. That doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Gary Bettman, other than the fact that he was involved in taking hockey away from me 4 times in my lifetime. I think 3 lockouts and 1 lost team.
I think you just singed my eyebrows with those hot takes right there.
Thank you for your honesty.
It's true. I mean, it's not like a super moral stand. It's just, I have the option to go to games, and I decide not to.
Sure. No,
there's a lot of other reasons why I don't go to games, and it's not just hockey. But
is it because Wild fans did the wave last Tuesday?
Well, that's on the list, yeah.
Because that might be a reason why I don't go back to a game after the game that I was at last Tuesday.
It's not that the wave bothers me so much. I'm worried about what I am going to do to the people around me who are doing the wave. Not a violent guy, but
right.
mean, it gets your blood up, and
Oh God, I was.
limbs start flailing. Who knows what can happen?
Yeah, I was less than enthused about seeing the Wave at a hockey game.
I was yelling.
Yeah.
I was yelling at people who were participating.
I was as well.
It just got to the point where I was at sporting events and I was afraid to stand up at any point.
For fear that you might start a wave?
Well, for fear the people might be like, he's doing the wave! We gotta get in on this! And then it looks like I started it, and I really just needed to go to the bathroom.
Yeah. Yeah. God forbid you raise your hands or something if you have to stretch.
Right.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
I'm always two-hand stretching in my seat.
Exactly. Yeah, so I went to that game, the New Jersey game last week, as did Giles and the Wave, and then, not to say that they have a bad experience at the X, because I think the X is phenomenal as far as watching a hockey game goes, but between the Wave and the fact that I absolutely loathe the Let's Go Wild chant, it just, I don't know, made it, there's just two things that maybe bother me a lot more than they should, but...
Are you just worried that Girls Gone Wild is going to show up?
No, I'm just upset at the fact that somebody 10 years ago turned the name Wild into 2 syllables, and we've been okay with that for well over a decade now. And I don't understand it.
There's X amount of syllables in that chant.
Yeah.
You got to make it work.
Yeah, there's other teams, and granted, there's not a whole lot of one-syllable teams out there. I'll give people that, but just come up with something different. I'm not saying that we need to rip off JETS, Jets, but, they didn't subject themselves to making Jets a 2-syllable name, and neither should we.
Now you just got me curious to see how many 1-syllable teams there are in the whole league.
I just... it's tough to do, granted.
By the dude chant. I hate that.
Yeah, I understand it, and I don't know. I could take it or leave it. I'm not a big fan, but I'm like, people are. Any chant that sounds like a boo, it's not that it's super confusing because people know it's obviously do, but still, I don't know. Seems kind of weird.
Welcome to Minnesota. We hate officials, and any time a player has a ooh sound in their name, we say ooh. I
think that's fairly universal. Fans just like chanting names like that, all the way, back to, I think of Pat Falloon. But
no, they were actually booing Pat Falloon.
They were. You're probably right. They were booing Pat Falloon. That's a good point. But yeah, I don't know. I'm with you, Giles. It's just too stereotypical Minnesota of me. But just shut up and watch a hockey game. I don't know.
I did find out the number of 1-syllable teams.
Sure.
While you guys were talking.
Okay.
And the weird part is they're all in the Western Conference.
Okay, Ducks, Jets.
So the Blues,
Kings, Blues.
Ducks, Flames, Wild. Why is Wild really 1-syllable? The Jets, Kings, Sharks, Stars. There you go.
Huh.
Did you say Canucks?
No, I said Ducks.
Oh, I said Ducks.
Oh, it sounded like Canucks on mine. I was like, okay.
Yeah, Canuck is 1-syllable. You say it right.
Yeah.
Anyway, that just got me thinking. And I went down the standings, and I was like, wow, there's nothing in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, and as much as, I don't know that we necessarily should have gone with the Go Wild Go chant as our de facto chant, but I guess I wouldn't be as grammatically offended by it, I guess is what I'm saying.
I would love to be the first NHL group of fans that, and again, I'm going back to soccer here,
sure,
that comes up with individual chants for individual players. A soccer player doesn't join a club, he joins a club on January 1st, and by the 15th, they've got a song for him. And they really just repurpose the lyrics of popular songs.
Sure.
But it's awesome.
Is it kind of like the roll call at Yankee Stadium?
No, it's way better than that, because there's nothing worse than the roll call at Yankee Stadium.
It's way less douchey.
That annoys me so much. No, literally, I'm trying to think of an example of.
Well, soccer fans just like to sing.
If I wasn't trying to think of it on the spot, I could come up with 100 because they happen all the time. But yeah, just think of any popular song that you can just jam someone's name into.
Right.
And that's basically what happens. But you get 20,000 people singing them at once. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And it would be unique to the sport. And you wouldn't have to hear Let's Go Wild anymore.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
You probably the one that you could come up with on the top of your head is you put Devin Dubnik's name in a Scooby-Doo theme song, and you got yourself a whole evening.
I like that. That's a good call because I'm becoming a huge fan of Devin Dubnik, and I was already a huge fan of Scooby-Doo. So we're good.
Huh. Well then,
it's a win-win.
Cartoon dogs solving mysteries.
Yep. What's not to like?
Shots.
What's not to like?
That seems like as good a place as any to end a podcast.
I'll agree with that.